Ask Reddit. What is the most out-of-touch thing someone has said/done? Why don't you live on disability? As a response to disabled people complaining about local government cutting back programs designed for making gainful employment accessible. I had a friend from college who is blind. We were at a friend's place and there were these guys there who kept saying things to him along the lines of, well, you can just collect disability, you're all set. Which is crummy because disability doesn't pay jack. He ended up making a pretty good career for himself too. He works with tech giants to make their programs more accessible. He is very no BS and will lie to companies but on fire if they aren't accessible. My disabled grandmother was finally, after a whole pony show, awarded $17/month in food stamps. When reported to Disability/SS, they reassessed her, and she was reduced $21, and it cost her $27 and in gas to appointments and copies of paperwork to get that $17/month, and she was required to redo that every 3 months. They made her wait 6 hours for her appointment one day, leading to a blood clot that hospitalized her for 3 weeks. When she didn't renew the food stamps because she physically wasn't capable, SS/disability never renewed that $21, and getting assistance ended up costing her far more than it ever helped her. I was in a restroom once and overheard a group of girls at the sinks. One girl says she wanted to buy a leather jacket, but was going to wait because it's a big purchase. This other girl responds immediately with, you should just go to Turkey to get a leather jacket. There's a pause, and then the first girl says, are leather jackets less expensive there? The second girl takes a second to consider what was just asked, then dismisses it with, you should just go to Turkey for the vibes and then pick up a jacket while you're there. I was fortunate enough to go to a slightly pricey summer school, and one of my classmates, whose parents were loaded, said, I don't see why everyone doesn't just go to private schools, and it's so unfair that poor people don't have to pay for college. With a hefty storm approaching England, a politician advised those in its path that they should maybe leave and go to their second or third homes to be safe. This reminds me of Mitt Romney telling young people to borrow $10 from their parents to get started in business, as though all families have a disposable $10 just lying around. Some out-of-touch Australian politician said young people should just ask their parents to pay for a house deposit. Youth radio station asked listeners to ask their parents and tell them the results. A lot of new phone who dis. Responses lol. Over a decade ago, I drove a yellow cab for a living. I picked up a well-off gentleman and took him to the local country club. He was surprised that I wasn't interested in joining when the club charged most of my yearly salary to join. According to him, it was only $50,000 and to start. When we got there, he tried to negotiate a lower fare. An acquaintance of mine who is extremely fascinated by rich people told me that she has a friend who buys branded clothes and donated some to her because she doesn't wear the same clothes more than once. I felt really sorry because they are both not rich, and they think that rich people never repeat clothes. I had a business owner tell me once he does not pay his employees more because they don't spend their money wisely. They should be investing in commercial real estate. This man makes Scrooge look generous. My very, very wealthy boss was telling me about a recent vacation with a private plane to a private yacht anchored off of some beautiful island once, and she looked right at me, while knowing exactly how much money I made because she hired me, and said, if you ever get the chance to do this, you really should. I just sort of blankly looked at her and said, you bet. My boss at an old job let one of his friends who sold insurance come into the shop, it was an auto garage, to give a pitch about buying insurance from him. No one took any of the brochures. We just stared at the guy. I was being paid $10/HR. ASIF, I had the money to take on extra bills for no reason. Many years ago, at a previous employer, they did something similar. One of the managers was big into United Way. They brought in a rep to pitch us on all donating. The big selling point was that it could be set up as a payroll deduction, so we wouldn't even notice it. The worst part is that the rep pulled up in a fancy BMW and stepped out covered in pearls and diamonds. That bitch had the gall to stand there and beg us for $1 when her outfit was worth more than any of us would make in a couple of months. If you give a homeless person $100 and they'll spend it in a day, if you give a rich person $100 and they'll put it into savings. Yay, Mason, give money to someone with no money, they'll use it to meet their needs. Give money to someone who already has their needs met. They can afford to put that money away for the future. My coworker's son was having some behavior trouble in school. She went and bought him and his fellow troublemakers a buttload of candy to have at lunch because she didn't think it was fair for them to lose a few minutes of recess. She really is one of the dumbest people I've ever met. Stunningly stupid. At university, when I was searching for a new job all day every weekend, and my girlfriend, now wife, who had never had a job, said, "I don't get it, why don't you just get a job?" If one of my friends wanted a job, they just got one. Found out her friends all worked for one of their parents' companies. I reminded her first time she looked for a job. Why don't you ask your father to pay for it? I was working in a French private school with out-of-touch teenagers from wealthy families. Each year, they'd do a school trip either to Asia or North America. One of my students just couldn't afford it. The trip was so expensive. And the others couldn't understand why. Like, can't the parents pay for it as theirs do? They were nice kids, but sincerely could not understand that not everyone was as privileged as them. When are you going to buy a house? The most out of touch and tone deaf thing to say in 2024. This is my grandparents and my mother every single time I see them. It took me years to get it through my grandfather's head that where we live, a condo is 50% more expensive than what my bank is willing to loan me. And I'm paycheck to paycheck with rent, so I can't come up with that 50% down payment. He then brags that he bought his house for $49 in 1974, while he was the sole income earner with a wife and 5 kids, and it's now worth $800 in K. So I just need to buckle down and buy one now before I have a family. I reply that $49 in 1974 is equal to around $300 in K today, according to the Federal Reserve. So unless he's willing to sell me his house for 38% of what it's worth, there is no point in discussing why I can't afford to buy a house in the area. Picture this. I am in high school. My mother and I are told that I have a terminal heart condition, and she takes her own life. I found her body, and my father was away on a business trip for days, and nobody knows where, until they find someone at his office that knows. So I, alone as a teen, have to handle the police and all that. My dad comes home, decides this is a perfect time to restart his own life, and evicts me. I graduated high school homeless, crashing in people's guest rooms and basements. College dreams dashed. My best friend, my only lifeline, says this: "Will you stop pining about your mother? That was like 6 months ago, get over it. I lost my bomber jacket at Clyde's and you don't see me still going on and on about. For Chris' sake, that was back in high school." Now, in their defense, they were 17 years old, and teens say some pretty dumb things, myself included. But that was the hardest verbal slap in the face I ever got, and was the beginning of the end of our friendship. Oh, and yeah, the terminal heart condition was not terminal, since this was nearly 40 years ago. What's the most out-of-touch thing anyone has said to you? Feel free to share in the comments below. Please consider subscribing and liking for more daily videos.